In the annals of naval history, few warships have captured the imagination and respect as did the Japanese battleship Yamato. Conceived in secrecy and constructed with a blend of formidable technology and national pride, the Yamato emerged as a symbol of Japan's naval ambitions and its desire for supremacy at sea during World War II. The story of the Yamato begins in the 1930s, a time when Japan, driven by imperial ambitions and a burgeoning militaristic ideology, sought to expand its influence across East Asia and the Pacific. Central to this strategy was a powerful navy, capable of challenging the naval forces of the Western powers. The Washington Naval Treaty of 1922, which aimed to limit naval armaments, was seen by Japanese naval strategists not just as a constraint, but as a challenge to be overcome. In a bold response, they envisioned a battleship so mighty and so technologically advanced that it would overshadow all others, the Yamato. Construction of the Yamato commenced in utmost secrecy in 1937 at the Kure Naval Arsenal. This secrecy was maintained to such an extent that even the workers were unaware of the full scale and purpose of the project they were part of. The Yamato was designed to be the world's largest and most powerful battleship, with a displacement of over 70,000 tons, a length of 263 meters, and armed with 946 centimeters, 18.1-inch, main guns, the largest ever mounted on a warship. These guns were capable of firing shells over 40 kilometers, outranging any Allied naval artillery. But the Yamato was more than just a collection of impressive statistics. It represented the pinnacle of Japanese naval engineering and a symbol of national pride. The ship's design incorporated the latest advancements in armor and propulsion, making it not only powerful, but also relatively fast for its size, with a top speed of 27 knots. Its armor was unprecedented, designed to withstand hits from any contemporary shell or torpedo. In essence, the Yamato was Japan's answer to the naval challenge posed by the United States and Britain, a tangible manifestation of its determination to dominate the seas. The Yamato's completion in December 1941 coincided with a pivotal moment in world history, the attack on Pearl Harbor and the subsequent entry of the United States into World War II. The battleship, however, did not play a prominent role in this or other early engagements in the Pacific theater. This was partly due to its immense value as a strategic asset and partly due to the changing nature of naval warfare, where aircraft carriers were becoming increasingly important. Despite its limited early use, the Yamato's presence was a constant psychological threat to the Allies. It was the embodiment of Japan's naval might and a floating fortress that seemed almost invincible. The mere possibility of the Yamato's involvement in a naval engagement required the Allies to allocate substantial resources and planning to counter it. The Yamato's first significant combat role came in the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944. By this time, the tide of war had turned against Japan, but the Yamato, as part of the larger fleet, was still a formidable opponent. The battle, however, highlighted the declining relevance of traditional battleships in the face of air power. The Yamato, with all its might, was not able to change the course of the battle, dominated as it was by aircraft carriers and planes. The ship's final and most infamous mission was Operation Tengo in April 1945. As the war turned increasingly dire for Japan, a desperate plan was formulated to use the Yamato in a one-way mission against the Allied forces at Okinawa. This mission, which would ultimately lead to the ship's demise, was symbolic of the tragic trajectory of the war for Japan, a path marked by initial successes, overreach, and eventual catastrophic defeat. As the legend of the Yamato grew in both Japan and among its adversaries, it became more than just a battleship. It was a symbol of Japanese naval power, a floating embodiment of the nation's technological prowess and martial spirit. Yet, its fate was also emblematic of the broader strategic miscalculations and the eventual downfall of the Japanese Empire in the Pacific War. The Yamato story is not just one of technological marvel and military might, but also of the human aspirations and follies that so often drive nations into the tumult of war. In its rise and fall, the Yamato reflects the complex tapestry of World War II, a war that reshaped the world and left a lasting legacy on the pages of history. As the Pacific War raged on, the Allied forces, particularly the United States, increasingly relied on a combination of intelligence gathering and strategic planning to gain an upper hand against the Japanese Imperial Navy. Central to their focus was the formidable Japanese battleship Yamato, a symbol of naval supremacy that posed a significant threat to Allied operations in the Pacific. Understanding and countering this Leviathan of the seas became a critical objective for the U.S. Navy. The journey to locate and engage the Yamato began with the meticulous work of codebreakers and intelligence analysts. Stationed at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, was a small, dedicated group of linguists and cryptanalysts tasked with intercepting and deciphering Japanese naval communications. This unit, known as Station Hypo, played a crucial role in the Pacific theater. Led by the brilliant commander Joseph Rochefort, they worked tirelessly, breaking down the complex Japanese naval code known as JN-25. The success of these code breakers cannot be overstated. Their efforts provided the Allies with invaluable insights into Japanese naval movements and intentions. By early 1945, the war had turned decidedly against Japan. The U.S. Navy had achieved significant victories in battles like Midway and Leyte Gulf, diminishing the Japanese fleet's capacity. However, the Yamato remained a potent symbol and tool in Japan's arsenal. The American strategy thus pivoted towards a proactive stance against this behemoth, intending to remove it from the equation before it could be used in a decisive manner. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet, understood that the key to neutralizing the Yamato lay in air power. The rise of the aircraft carrier had revolutionized naval warfare, shifting the balance of power from the big guns of battleships to the versatile and far-reaching impact of carrier-based aircraft. Nimitz and his strategists, aware of this paradigm shift, planned to use this to their advantage. The U.S. Navy's strategy involved a combination of reconnaissance and overwhelming air power. Reconnaissance flights, both from land bases and from carriers, played a critical role in tracking the Yamato's movements. These flights were perilous, often flying deep into enemy territory, but they were essential in providing real-time intelligence. Meanwhile, on the American carriers, preparations were underway for a potential strike against the Yamato. Pilots were briefed on the importance of their mission and the nature of their formidable target. Special emphasis was placed on tactics that would be effective against a ship as large and well-armored as the Yamato. Torpedo bombers practiced low-altitude runs, necessary to hit below the Yamato's waterline armor, while dive bombers worked on precision strikes aimed at the battleship's deck and superstructure. The American plan was not merely about destroying a single battleship. It was a strategic move to erode the Japanese naval power and morale. The Yamato, in American eyes, was more than a warship. It was a psychological weapon, a symbol of Japanese resilience and might. By targeting the Yamato, the U.S. Navy aimed to deliver a crippling blow to Japanese naval prestige and their ability to wage war effectively. As these preparations were underway, intelligence from Station Hypo provided a breakthrough. In early 1945, they intercepted and decrypted messages indicating the Yamato was preparing to leave its base in Japan for a significant operation. This information was quickly relayed to the Pacific Fleet Command, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic naval engagements of the Pacific War. The stage was set, the players were ready, and the curtain was about to rise on a pivotal act in the Pacific theater. The U.S. Navy, armed with critical intelligence and a well-devised strategy, was poised to challenge the might of the Imperial Japanese Navy's greatest asset. The ensuing battle would not only be a test of military might and strategic acumen, but would also signify the changing nature of naval warfare, where air power and intelligence had become the key to supremacy at sea. As intelligence reports confirmed the imminent departure of the Yamato for what was suspected to be a major offensive, the atmosphere among the American forces shifted palpably. At U.S. naval bases across the Pacific, preparations for a significant operation were underway, with the objective clear: to intercept and neutralize the Japanese Leviathan. In the early days of April 1945, Task Force 58, the primary striking force of the U.S. Fifth Fleet, was positioned east of Okinawa. This formidable array of power, consisting of several fleet carriers, light carriers, battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, was under the command of Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher. The fleet was in the midst of supporting the Okinawa campaign, but now a new mission of monumental importance was at hand. At the heart of this operation were the aviators, the young pilots and air crews whose skill and bravery would be tested against the might of the Yamato. On the decks of carriers like the USS Hornet, USS Bennington, and USS Essex, squadrons of Grumman F-6F Hellcat fighters, Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers, and Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers were being readied for battle. The pilots and aircrew were briefed in detail about their target. They pored over reconnaissance photos and intelligence reports, studying the Yamato's formidable defenses and its weaknesses. The briefings were thorough, with an emphasis on the battleship's thick armor and the requirement for precision in their attacks. For many of these young men, this was their first encounter with a battleship of such magnitude, and the gravity of their task was not lost on them. Torpedo bomber pilots practiced low-altitude, high-speed runs, understanding that their torpedoes needed to strike below the Yamato's armored belt to inflict maximum damage. Dive bomber crews worked on their precision, knowing that their target was a moving behemoth with a plethora of anti-aircraft defenses. Fighter pilots prepared for combat air patrol, ready to protect the bombers and torpedo planes from Japanese fighter interception. Meanwhile, the ship's crew members were equally involved in the preparations. Deck crews worked tirelessly to ensure that aircraft were maintained, armed, and ready for the mission. Ammunition was stocked, fuel lines checked, and engines tested. The sense of urgency and focus was palpable on the decks of these carriers. As the final plans were laid out, Admiral Raymond Spruance, overall commander of the Fifth Fleet, weighed the options and risks. The decision to send Task Force 58 to engage the Yamato was not taken lightly. The risk of Japanese air attacks on the carriers, potential submarine threats, and the sheer firepower of the Yamato itself were all factors in his calculations. However, the strategic importance of eliminating the Yamato outweighed these concerns. Spruance's decision was clear: the fleet would engage. Back in Washington, D.C., top military leaders, including Fleet Admiral Ernest King and Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal, monitored the situation closely. The impending engagement with the Yamato was more than a tactical operation. It was a significant moment in the Pacific Campaign, one that could shift the naval balance even further in favor of the Allies. As the hours ticked down to the engagement, there was a sense of historic significance among the men of Task Force 58. They were about to be part of an operation that could mark a turning point in the naval war in the Pacific. The mood among the pilots and crews was a mix of determination, anticipation, and apprehension. They understood that success would require not just courage, but also precision, skill, and a bit of fortune. In the early hours of April 7, 1945, as the first light of dawn touched the Pacific, the air crews took their positions. The engines of the Hellcats, Helldivers, and Avengers roared to life, breaking the morning stillness. On the flight decks, pilots performed their final checks, exchanged last words with their crewmates, and cast their eyes towards the horizon. The stage was set for one of the most dramatic confrontations of the Pacific War. The young aviators of Task Force 58 were about to face the ultimate test against the pride of the Japanese Navy. In the skies over the Pacific, history was waiting to be written. April 7, 1945, dawned with a sense of imminent confrontation over the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. As the sun rose, casting long shadows on the flight decks of the American carriers, the air was tense with anticipation. The pilots and crew of Task Force 58 knew that the day would bring one of the most significant engagements of the Pacific War. The mission was clear: to locate and destroy the Japanese battleship Yamato, along with its escort fleet. Intelligence had indicated that the Yamato, accompanied by a cruiser and 8 destroyers, was heading towards Okinawa, possibly to attack American forces engaged in the island's invasion. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher, the commander of Task Force 58, had ordered a full strike. Over 300 aircraft, a mix of fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers, were prepared for the mission. The pilots were briefed, the planes were armed, and as the first light of day broke, the carriers turned into the wind, ready to launch their aircraft. The first wave of planes took off just after dawn. The sea was choppy, and the decks were wet with spray, making the takeoff tricky, but the aviators were well-trained and determined. Fighter planes, led by the Grumman F-6F Hellcats, roared off the decks first, their role to provide cover for the bombers and torpedo planes that followed. The formation of American aircraft headed towards their target, flying low over the ocean to avoid early detection. The pilots were acutely aware of the danger they were about to face. The Yamato was not only the largest battleship ever built, but also bristled with formidable anti-aircraft defenses. Additionally, there was the threat of Japanese fighter planes, which could be scrambled to intercept the American strike force. Meanwhile, on board the Yamato, the crew was on high alert. The battleship, with its massive 18.1-inch guns and thick armor, was a floating fortress, but its crew knew they were a prime target for American air power. The Japanese had expected an attack, and the Yamato was prepared to defend itself vigorously. The ship's captain, Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito, a seasoned naval commander, was under no illusions about the seriousness of the situation. Back on the American carriers, a second wave of aircraft was being readied as reports came in from the first wave, now closing in on the Yamato's last known position. The tension on the carriers was palpable. Every sailor, pilot, and officer understood that the success of this mission could significantly alter the course of the war in the Pacific. As the American aircraft approached the target area, the ocean seemed a vast, empty expanse. Then, as they neared the coordinates provided by intelligence, the lookout spotted the unmistakable silhouette of the Yamato and its escort fleet. The moment of engagement had arrived. The Hellcat fighters swooped in first, diving towards the Japanese ships to engage any enemy aircraft and strafe the decks of the ships to suppress anti-aircraft fire. Tracer bullets lit up the sky as the Yamato and its escorts unleashed a barrage of anti-aircraft fire in a desperate attempt to fend off the attackers. Following the fighters, the SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers began their descent. Pilots aimed for the Yamato's deck, hoping to penetrate the ship's armor and inflict damage to its superstructure. The air was filled with the scream of diving planes and the thunder of explosions as bombs struck the Japanese ships. Then came the TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, flying in low and fast, skimming the surface of the ocean. Their target was the Yamato's waterline, the most vulnerable part of the ship's armor. The pilots released their torpedoes with precision, braving the intense anti-aircraft fire. The torpedoes sped towards the Yamato, leaving white trails in the blue Pacific waters. The Yamato, despite its size and power, was not agile enough to evade the incoming torpedoes. Explosions rocked the ship as torpedoes struck its sides. Water surged into the damaged hull, and the battleship began to list. On board, the crew fought valiantly to control the damage and keep their ship afloat. In the midst of the chaos, the American planes continued their relentless assault. Dive bombers attacked again, followed by another wave of torpedo bombers. The Yamato was engulfed in smoke and fire, a giant wounded in the vastness of the ocean. The attack lasted for several hours, with the American aircraft returning to their carriers to rearm and refuel before heading back to continue the assault. The Japanese escorts, outnumbered and outgunned, struggled to protect the Yamato and fend off the attackers. As the final wave of American planes departed the battle area, the once mighty Yamato was a burning wreck. It was listing heavily, and fires raged uncontrollably across its decks. The ship that had once been the pride of the Japanese Imperial Navy was now a symbol of its impending defeat. Back on the American carriers, the pilots and crews awaited news of the outcome. When confirmation came of the Yamato's sinking, there was a sense of triumph mixed with relief. The mission had been a success, but it had come at a cost. Some planes had not returned, and brave men had been lost. The sinking of the Yamato marked a turning point in the Pacific War. It was not just a military victory for the United States, but also a powerful statement of naval air power's supremacy over traditional battleships. The day of the attack would be remembered as a pivotal moment in the struggle for control of the Pacific, a testament to the skill and courage of the aviators who took to the skies on that fateful day in April 1945. The morning of April 7, 1945, bore witness to a dramatic unfolding of events in the Pacific theater. As the American aircraft from Task Force 58 approached the Japanese fleet, the air was thick with tension and the imminent promise of conflict. At the heart of this fleet was the Yamato, steaming towards Okinawa, unaware that it was sailing into a deadly trap. The first sign of the impending assault came when lookouts aboard the Yamato spotted American aircraft on the horizon. Alarms blared and the crew sprang into action, preparing to defend their ship against the attackers. The Yamato's anti-aircraft guns, manned by determined gunners, swung into position, ready to unleash a storm of fire. Above, the American pilots, focused and resolute, began their attack runs. The Hellcats, diving towards the Japanese ships, engaged the few Japanese fighter planes in the air and strafed the decks of the ships, attempting to suppress the anti-aircraft fire. Their machine guns rattled as they made pass after pass, dodging the barrage of bullets and shells coming from below. Following the fighters, the Helldiver dive bombers commenced their descent towards the Yamato. Pilots with nerves of steel dived through a hail of anti-aircraft fire, each focused on delivering their payload with deadly accuracy. The Yamato, a massive target, braced for impact. Explosions rocked the battleship as bombs found their mark, blasting holes in the deck and superstructure, causing fires and chaos among the crew. But it was the Avenger torpedo bombers that posed the greatest threat. Approaching at low altitude, almost skimming the ocean's surface, they braved the intense anti-aircraft fire to launch their torpedoes. The torpedoes, released at close range, sped towards the Yamato, striking the battleship below its armored belt. Water erupted in towering plumes as the torpedoes exploded against the hull, tearing open the ship's side and flooding its compartments. The Yamato, though heavily armored and designed to withstand significant punishment, was not invulnerable. The impacts from the bombs and torpedoes inflicted severe damage. Below deck, the situation was dire. Crew members fought valiantly to contain the fires and limit the flooding, but the damage was overwhelming. The ship began to list, its massive guns tilting towards the sky, rendered ineffective. Despite the damage, the Yamato's crew continued to fight back with determination. The ship's remaining anti-aircraft guns fired continuously, attempting to fend off the relentless waves of American aircraft. The escorting Japanese destroyers and cruisers also joined in the defense, laying down a protective screen of anti-aircraft fire. The battle raged on, with each side pushing to its limits. American pilots, aware of the significance of their mission, continued their attacks with relentless intensity. Wave after wave of aircraft swooped down on the Japanese fleet, each pass contributing to the destruction of the Yamato. Amid the chaos of battle, acts of bravery and sacrifice were abundant. American pilots, despite being hit by enemy fire, often continued their attack runs, ensuring their ordnance reached its target. Japanese sailors, even as their ship was sinking, kept firing their guns, refusing to yield. As the hours passed, the toll on the Yamato became increasingly apparent. The once mighty battleship, now heavily damaged, struggled to stay afloat. Its deck was a scene of devastation, twisted metal, billowing smoke, and the wounded and fallen crew members. Yet, the Yamato's captain, Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito, remained resolute, issuing orders in a desperate attempt to save his ship and crew. The climax of the battle came when a series of massive explosions rocked the Yamato. Its ammunition magazines, hit by bombs and torpedoes, detonated in a catastrophic blast. The explosion was so powerful that it was seen and heard miles away, sending a towering column of smoke and flame into the sky. The blast tore the ship apart, signaling the end of the Yamato. As the smoke cleared, the remnants of the once proud battleship lay scattered across the ocean. The Yamato, the symbol of Japanese naval power, was no more. The American aircraft, having completed their mission, turned back towards their carriers. The pilots, exhausted and emotionally drained, had little time to reflect on their victory. The reality of war meant that their thoughts were already turning to their next mission. The sinking of the Yamato was more than just a military victory for the United States. It was a symbolic moment in the Pacific War. The destruction of the world's largest battleship by air power alone was a stark demonstration of the shifting dynamics of naval warfare. The age of the battleship, with its big guns and heavy armor, was giving way to a new era dominated by aircraft carriers and aerial warfare. For the Japanese, the loss of the Yamato was a devastating blow, both materially and psychologically. The battleship, which had once embodied the might and ambition of the Imperial Japanese Navy, now lay at the bottom of the ocean, a testament to the futility of their situation. The sinking of the Yamato marked not just the loss of a ship, but the crumbling of an empire. The final hours of the battleship, Yamato, on April 7, 1945, were marked by a grim and unstoppable descent into destruction. As the American aircraft from Task Force 58 flew back to their carriers, the once mighty symbol of Japanese naval power was left burning and listing heavily in the waters of the East China Sea. The Yamato's end was not sudden. After enduring a relentless barrage of bombs and torpedoes, the ship was severely damaged and crippled, but still afloat. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito, The ship's commander, along with his crew, struggled valiantly to save the vessel. They worked feverishly to control the flooding and fires that raged throughout the ship, but their efforts were in vain. The damage inflicted was catastrophic, beyond any hope of repair or recovery. The Yamato's crew faced their fate with the discipline and resolve characteristic of the Imperial Japanese Navy. As the ship's situation worsened, orders were given to abandon ship. Sailors, many injured and exhausted, began to leave the doomed vessel. Lifeboats were launched and men jumped into the sea, clinging to whatever debris they could find. Yet, in a final act of loyalty and devotion, many crew members chose to remain on board, going down with their ship. In its last moments, the Yamato was a tragic spectacle. Flames engulfed the battleship, and thick black smoke billowed into the sky, visible for miles around. The ship listed increasingly to port, its giant guns now silent and pointing awkwardly towards the heavens. Then, a series of internal explosions, likely from the ship's ammunition magazines, tore through the Yamato. The force of the blasts was immense, ripping the battleship apart. The Yamato's final plunge was a slow, almost surreal process. The ship, mortally wounded and broken, tilted further and further until it finally capsized and began to sink. The ocean swallowed the pride of the Japanese fleet, pulling it down into its depths. Within minutes, the largest battleship ever constructed disappeared beneath the waves, leaving only a churning maelstrom of oil, debris, and the remnants of its crew struggling for survival in the water. The sinking of the Yamato was not just a physical event, it was a symbolic one. The battleship, which had been designed to be invincible and to embody the might of the Japanese Empire, was now a testament to the futility of such ambitions. Its destruction marked the end of an era in naval warfare, an era dominated by the belief in the supremacy of the big-gun battleship. For the survivors in the water, the battle's end brought little relief. The loss of their ship, their comrades, and the realization of their nation's impending defeat weighed heavily on them. Rescue efforts by the remaining Japanese escort ships were hampered by the fear of further American attacks, leaving many survivors stranded for hours, some even perishing before help could arrive. The fall of the Yamato was a poignant and powerful episode in the Pacific War, symbolizing the decline of the Japanese Imperial Navy and the shifting tides of World War II. Its demise represented not just the destruction of a battleship, but the shattering of Japan's naval aspirations and the inevitable march towards its surrender. The aftermath of the Yamato's sinking on April 7, 1945, resonated far beyond the churning waters of the East China Sea. It marked a pivotal moment in the Pacific theater, a stark symbol of Japan's diminishing naval power and the ascendance of American naval and air superiority. The event echoed through the ranks of both the Japanese and Allied forces, carrying with it a multitude of reflections, consequences, and changes in the course of the war. In Japan, the loss of the Yamato was a devastating blow both materially and psychologically. The battleship had been more than just a warship. It was a symbol of national pride and military strength. News of its sinking sent shockwaves through the Japanese high command and populace. The Imperial Navy had lost not only its most powerful battleship, but also a significant part of its remaining surface fleet. This defeat severely crippled Japan's ability to conduct large-scale naval operations and defend its remaining territories. The sinking also had a profound effect on the morale of the Japanese people and armed forces. The Yamato, often touted as unsinkable and a symbol of Japan's divine destiny to rule Asia, now lay at the bottom of the ocean. This loss, combined with the increasing Allied bombings of Japanese cities, brought a stark reality to the Japanese. The war was turning irreversibly against them. For the Allies, particularly the United States, The sinking of the Yamato was a significant strategic victory. It demonstrated the effectiveness of air power against traditional battleship might, reinforcing the strategic shift towards carrier-based operations. The successful operation against the Yamato provided a boost to Allied morale and was a testament to the skill and bravery of the American pilots and crew. The victory also had tactical implications. With the Yamato out of the picture, the American forces could focus more resources on the ongoing Okinawa campaign and the final push towards Japan. The sinking of the Yamato symbolized the weakening of Japan's ability to resist the advancing Allied forces, bringing the end of the war in the Pacific into clearer view. The human cost of the Yamato's demise was immense. Of the approximately 3,300 Japanese sailors aboard the Yamato, fewer than 300 survived. The survivors were left with not only the physical scars of battle, but also the psychological trauma of witnessing the destruction of their ship and the loss of their comrades. Their testimonies provide a poignant insight into the tragedy of war, the loyalty of the ship's crew, and the personal cost of military defeat. On the American side, the pilots and crew members who participated in the attack also carried with them the memories of the battle. Many reflected on the fear, adrenaline, and sense of duty they experienced during the mission. The awareness of having participated in a historic and decisive naval engagement was tempered by the recognition of the human lives lost on both sides. The sinking of the Yamato marked a watershed moment in naval warfare. It underscored the decline of the battleship as the dominant force at sea and the rise of air power as a decisive factor in naval engagements. This shift would influence naval strategy and ship design in the post-war world. Historically, the battle signified the nearing end of the Pacific War. It demonstrated the effectiveness of Allied military strategy and intelligence, the superiority of American industrial capacity, and the inevitability of Japan's defeat. The event became a symbol of the changing dynamics of World War II, representing a combination of technological advancement, strategic innovation, and the human capacity for courage and resilience. In the years following World War II, the story of the Yamato and its final battle became the subject of documentaries, books, and films, capturing the imagination of successive generations. Memorials and museums in both Japan and the United States commemorate the ship and those who served on it, serving as poignant reminders of the war and its lessons. In Japan, the Yamato has a dual legacy. It is remembered as a symbol of the country's wartime ambitions and technological prowess, as well as a tragic embodiment of the futility of war. For the United States and its allies, the sinking of the Yamato is a testament to their military achievement and a key milestone on the path to victory in the Pacific. As history continues to reflect on the events of World War II, the story of the Yamato remains a powerful narrative. It encapsulates the strategic and human elements of warfare, the rise and fall of empires, and the enduring impact of these events on the world. The legacy of the Yamato, in its rise, fall, and ultimate destruction, continues to resonate as a profound chapter in the annals of naval history. The sinking of the battleship Yamato on April 7, 1945, was not merely the conclusion of a naval operation. It was a historical event that resonated through the annals of World War II and naval warfare. The legacy of this battle is multifaceted, reflecting the complex tapestry of war, the evolution of military technology, and the enduring human stories of courage and tragedy. The Yamato's fate signified a fundamental shift in naval strategy and warfare. The supremacy of the battleship, long considered the backbone of naval power, was irrevocably challenged. The success of the American airstrike against the Yamato underscored the ascendance of carrier-based air power and marked a turning point in naval tactics. Post-World War II, naval powers around the world shifted their focus to aircraft carriers, recognizing them as the new arbiters of sea control and power projection. The battle also highlighted the rapid pace of technological advancement during World War II. The Yamato, with its massive guns and thick armor, was a marvel of its time, embodying the apex of battleship design. Yet it was rendered vulnerable by the very technology that had seemed secondary at the time of its conception: aircraft. This encounter underscored the importance of adaptability and innovation in military technology, lessons that remain relevant in modern defense strategies. Beyond strategy and technology, the legacy of the Yamato's sinking is deeply human. The battle illustrated the bravery and resilience of individuals in the face of overwhelming odds. The American pilots, embarking on a perilous mission against a formidable target, displayed remarkable courage and skill. Conversely, the Japanese crew's loyalty and determination, even in the face of imminent defeat, spoke to the human capacity for endurance and honor. The story of the Yamato transcends its military context, offering broader reflections on war and peace. For Japan, the Yamato was a symbol of national pride and military might, yet its loss highlighted the futility of war and the tragic consequences of unchecked militarism. In the post-war years, Japan's reflection on the lessons of the Yamato contributed to its embrace of pacifism and its re-emergence as a nation dedicated to peace and reconstruction. In the years since the end of World War II, the Yamato has been memorialized in various forms, including films, literature, and museums. These commemorations serve as a reminder of the war's horrors and the importance of remembering history's lessons. The story of the Yamato continues to be a subject of fascination and study, a powerful narrative of technological ambition, military strategy, and the human spirit. The legacy of the battle wherein the Yamato met its end is a lasting one. It serves as a poignant reminder of the cost of war, the rapid evolution of military technology, and the enduring nature of human bravery and sacrifice. As future generations reflect on the events of World War II, the story of the Yamato stands as a testament to the complexities of history, the transformative impact of technological innovation, and the perpetual need for vigilance in the pursuit of peace. In the depths of the Pacific, where the Yamato rests, lies not just a sunken battleship, but a chapter of history that continues to inform and inspire.